Right. Thank you very much for the introduction. And as you just heard, I'm Heather Rapetti from If This All, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about some different formatting that you can do in Webi with some interesting workarounds. So the couple of things that we're going to cover today is adding bars to tables, as well as ranking with input controls. So, I mean, I like to say that, right out of the box, Webi's great. It has a lot of really cool features and functionality that you can leverage to make great reports. But there's also a lot of really interesting kind of hidden features that you could leverage as well to work around some of the limitations that you might hit. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I jump into the first example, I wanted to kick it off with just a poll question, just to kind of get us started.
All right, so the poll question asks, when using tables of data, I prefer, and please select one, sorting my data alphabetically, sorting by the measures that I'm trying to convey, both, but I wish there was a way to combine both. So we're going to go ahead and give everyone a couple seconds to put in your answers for these. All right, we're going to go ahead and close it out. So it's your last chance here. All right, Heather, so it looks like 14% said sorting my data alphabetically, 25% said sorting by the measures that I'm trying to convey, and 61% said both, but I wish there was a way to combine both.
Okay, thank you, Anna Laura. So this was a bit of a leading question, and I put it in here for a reason because I personally agree. I wish there was a way to do both as well, and that's kind of what our first workaround is going to show you, is how to display your data in both ways, so to speak. So jumping back to the presentation, this looks like a standard Webi report to everybody, right? So we have our states and they're sorted alphabetically. We have our revenue and we have our revenue percentage. This is great. It has a lot of information in here, but it's hard to tell, just based on this small snapshot even, which states have the most revenue, which states have the least revenue. So what we're going to do today is we're going to add these bars to our table that kind of make these numbers jump out a little bit more. So before I jump into Webi and start building this report, I just wanted to run through quickly some of the different objects and variables and things that we're going to use in the report. That way later, when you come back to look at the presentation, you'll have access to all of this information as well. So this example has only 2 query objects. This is a very, very simple report that I'm starting with. And it does have 2 variables. So the first one is that revenue percentage that I was displaying. I just have to calculate that, and it's really simple. It's just the percentage of the revenue as a measure. And then the second one is what I call chart, and you can give it any name that you want, but I called it chart, and it's that last column that I'm going to use to display those bars. So the one thing you might notice in this variable is it does have this strange object that I'm calling in here, this char 9608, and you're probably wondering, what is that? That is actually what is called one full block. And what I just showed you at the bottom of the slide here is exactly what it's going to look like until we format it the way that we want it to look. It's just a character that's one block. So there is also conditional formatting that I'm going to be using in this report to color the bars different colors. And it's going to be based off of that revenue percentage, but we don't necessarily know what that revenue percentage that we're going to use for conditional formatting is yet. And why not? Because we need to look at our data first to determine the best values to use. And when we get into the example, that'll make a little bit more sense. But basically, you have to look at your different revenue percentages to try to determine what levels you want to use for your conditional formatting. So with that, let's get started on this first example and build the report. So I'm going to start a new Web Intelligence document. I hope. There we go. And we're going to use this financial sales. This is just a demo universe that we have. That's the sample data. And again, just 2 simple objects, the customer state as well as a measure, which is revenue. That's all we need for this report example. So first thing I like to do when I jump into Webi is clean up my report. And I'm also going to be throwing in a couple little side tips and things that I use while cleaning as I go, and I'll mention those here as well. So I usually remove the title if I don't need it. And I actually like to hide this header bar if I'm not going to use it either. I personally just like to have no blank space at the top. So one of the things I usually like to do also is move my table to the top left of the report. So the easiest way that I have found to do this is if you grab your table on the right side and see how it becomes the little four-way arrow, you can actually grab that table and move it up to the top left as far as you can. And see, I'm even pushing it outside of the reporting area. And when I let go, it will automatically, it should automatically snap that. There it goes. Snap is just a delay. Snap the table up to the top left of your report for you. So it's a really quick, easy way to get it there. Even if you, like I said, push it all the way off the page, do that one more time, it'll snap to the top left. I'm also going to format my columns just so that they're all fit to width. I'll do that. And there we go. So this is beginning to look a little bit like the report that I showed you at the beginning. So the next step is to create those variables. The first variable that I had was just revenue percentage. And this was percentage of revenue. Pretty simple. Click OK. And I'm going to bring that variable into my report now. Put it right at the end here. And I can format it so that it looks like a percent. So format number, and I'm going to go with the standard. That's fine for this example. So again, this is great, but if I want to see it by state, it's hard for me to tell, again, which states have more or less revenue. And that's where my second variable is going to come into play. And this is going to be that one that I call chart. This is actually a dimension. And it is going to use the fill function. So that just basically fills in with whatever I tell it to fill with. And I'm going to use that char, character 9608, to fill this in based on revenue percentage. Click OK. And we will bring that variable into the report. Uh-oh, there's nothing there. So that's actually intentional. I kind of want to build the variable as we go along just so that you understand the different components that I'm going to use in it. So if you think about the nature of a percentage, it's less than 1, right? A percentage is numerically 0 to 1. So if you're telling it to put in a number of characters less than 1, you're not going to have any characters. So the first step to get around that is to multiply this whole thing times 100. And that will give you a whole number. So if I add that in, there are my blocks now appearing. So the second thing that I personally like to do is, even for these very small percentages, I like to have something showing. I don't like to have what looks like a blank bar here. So because of the nature of Webi as well, you're not going to have any values here that are equal to 0, generally speaking, because you brought it in as a measure and summed it up. You can also go in, and this is just another little trick I like to do, just add 1 to your formula. So even those small ones are going to equate to something. Once that calculates, there we go. So even these smaller revenue percentages now have something showing. This is pretty cool. You can see already that things are starting to jump out, and you can tell which of your states has the most revenue. The last thing that I personally like to do in this situation is apply conditional formatting as well to give a little bit of color to that chart so it really starts to jump out at me. And this is where, I said in the presentation earlier, you kind of have to look at your numbers to determine what you're going to use for that conditional formatting. So just kind of glancing through here, I can see, just by looking at it, that my highest percentage is around 24%. So I know that my formatting doesn't have to have huge numbers for it to make an impact on this particular chart. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a new role. And I'm going to start to build out this conditional formatting role. So the first thing I want to do is I want to filter it based on an object or variable. And I'm going to use that revenue percentage to do my filtering. So if my revenue percentage is less than or equal to, and I'm going to start pretty low. I'm going to start with 1%, because I did have quite a few that were under 1%. In this case, I want the cell content to be red, and that's already set for me. So if I click OK, we now see that these smaller blocks are red. So I'm going to go back now into that same role and just keep building it out. I just wanted to show everybody what it's doing as I build it. So you can now see I'm starting to add some color to the chart. I come in here and I edit my role. Now I'm going to add another condition. And I'm just going to keep adding on these revenue percentage conditions. So again, pick that revenue percentage. And this time I'm going to do less than or equal to 5%. And I want this one to be not green. Green to me indicates good. So I'm going to keep that one for when we get up to the big numbers. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use orange. I like orange. That's a good color. And now if I click OK and OK again, just to show you, you can now see it's starting to come through as more and more colors. Edit that role again. And greater than or equal to. I knew something looked funny. There we go. Let's switch that to less than or equal to. There we go. Now the smaller next size of bars is orange. So again, let's go back in and I'm going to add 2 more rules. I'm going to add one for 10% and then one for everything else above 10%. I'm going to add one more rule here. Choose that revenue percentage again. Less than or equal to, and in this case, 10%. And I want this one to be a nice yellow color. Yellow. And then I'm going to add one more rule that kind of filters for everything else. I'm going to also say revenue percentage. And I had said less than or equal to, so now I can just say greater than, and that should cover us for everything else. And this one is going to be my green. Click OK. We now have a table that has everything sorted alphabetically, so you can find the state that you're looking for quickly. It also has this last column of chart that basically shows you, which numbers are the highest and lowest based on not only a bar, but also colors. Any questions on anything I just did there?
We did have a question come in. The question asked, what is chart 9608? Is this a chart type? How to look it up?
So it's actually a character code, right? So, and it's the equivalent of one full block. So, I mean, if you go on to, Google or whatever, and you look up, list of character codes or something like that, or char, and then open parentheses and search for it, you can find different lists of them out on the internet. I personally don't keep a list of them because I only look for them when I need them, quite honestly, but they are pretty easy to find. So again, this one's just the equivalent, there's also, if you searched for character code one full block, something along those lines, you would also find it.
Awesome. And we had another question that's similar to that. It says, is there a list of other characters in addition to 9608?
Yes, there are probably any number of them. Again, I don't personally keep a list, but anytime I'm trying to do something like this, I usually start going down the rabbit hole of Google and searching for things. And I tend to find, over and over again, the same sets of different characters. This one's just a really useful one because, again, it gives you that block character.
Awesome. And then someone asked, how did you get the chart thing?
So the chart here, it's actually, if you think about it, it's really text, right? But in place of there being a number or a letter here, it's a block instead. It's really just a font that produces blocks instead of letters or numbers. So it's really part of this formula. So I'm using a fill, and I'm telling it to fill with that char 9608, and then base it on revenue percentage times 100 plus 1. So I could go in here and I could actually, in theory, change char 9608 to anything I wanted to, right? I could fill it with the letter A over and over and over again. That's kind of an arbitrary thing, but I chose that because it equals that block and it makes it look more like a chart. So you're kind of tricking Webi into showing a chart in place of text characters.
These are ASC2 characters.
Thank you. I'm sure that, thank you for the technical term for it.
And then the last question, can you share the fill formula in the chat? I'm sure we could do this towards the end, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I guess I could also just grab this formula real quick and just type it here, right? There we go. Oops. Copy. Should we? That way, if I click away from it, I don't have to kind of get back to it. There we go. So I just typed it into the chat as well, which formula I use. And it'll also be in the copy of the presentation when you receive that as well. Because I did purposely put some of these formulas and things into the presentation too, so you can see them.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay. Thank you. So jumping back over to the presentation, I'm going to move on to the next part. And again, I want to kick it off with yet another poll question. So Anna Laura, if you could read the next poll question, that'd be awesome.
Yes, all right, so here is the second poll question. Which of the following features do you use more? Please select one. Input controls, showing/hiding tables using formulas, or I have never used either of these features. So we're going to give you just a few seconds to put your answers in there so that Heather can kind of gauge the crowd that we have here today. All right, just the last few seconds and we'll be closing it out. All right, so here are the results. 67% said input controls, 24% said showing/hiding tables using formulas, and 9% said I've never used either of these features.
Okay, so thank you, Anna Laura. Again, I put in a bit of a leading question there, which is going to bring us into our next example, but I did that on purpose as well. I'm going to use a combination of input controls as well as one of my favorite features, which is showing and hiding tables using formulas. So, I mean, I kind of believe not everybody knows this even exists. It's such a powerful feature of web intelligence, and I find myself using it quite often to show things dynamically when I might not have been able to do so before. So again, before I jump into the actual example and build the report, I want to kind of run through a couple slides ahead of time just to give you an idea of what we'll be doing. So this is the idea of what the report's going to look like at the end. So we're going to have these input controls on the left side with different percentages. And then on the right side, we're going to be displaying tables dynamically based on what is chosen in those input controls. So again, a really simple example, only 2 query objects just to get this started, and then a couple of variables. So there's going to be one variable called top percent, and we're going to start it off equal to just blank, just quote, quote. And that's actually going to be what we use our input control to feed. So that variable is going to be fed by what is selected in those input controls. And then finally, our second variable is going to be our header, which I like to display dynamically as well. So basically, the header is going to change based on what you choose in that input control. So you might see the 100%, the 75%, and so on and so forth. And then I keep saying there's going to be input controls. We're also going to have that, and it's only going to be one based on that top percent variable that we're going to create. It's going to be radio buttons and so on and so forth. Again, I just like to show this ahead of time in case you come back later and decide I want to rebuild this report. At least you have all the information up front. So jumping over to Webi, get started on building this one as well. So I'm going to close this last one. We don't need this one right now, and start a new one. Same universe, and same 2 variables actually. And again, the first thing I generally like to do is clean up the report a little bit. So this one does have a header. So I'm going to take this header and I'm going to move it up to the top left of my header section. Then I'm going to take the table and again, use that little grab and by the right side of the table trick and push it to the top left of the section I'm in. If I push it up here, it'll go into the header. But if I kind of put it halfway into the header, it'll snap right below the header for me automatically. Oops. Next, I want to fix my columns so that they are fit to width. And on this one, since we're looking at a ranked table based on revenue, I'm actually going to sort this descending as well. Sort that from that way, when we're looking at the top states, they're sorted in descending order. It'll look like they're sorted that way. So I did have those 2 variables as well. So let's create those first. The first one's going to be that one called top percent. And it is a dimension. And again, it's just equal to blank for now. And we'll change that later based on what we choose in our input control. And then our second variable is going to be that header, what's going to display. It's another dimension, and we're going to build this one out. So put the word top plus. And I like to put my if statements on their own row just so they're easier to see. So I'm going to build out a quick if statement here, and I'm going to say if that top percent variable is blank, which it is first, then we want it to display 100%. Otherwise, I want it to display that top percent variable. And then at the end of that, I also want to add by revenue. And I forgot the plus sign. Okay, when I'm building formulas, I usually like to check them because sometimes I type things a little bit wrong. There we go. Good quote. There, okay. And I click OK. Now I'm going to swap that into here, into this header. I'm going to go in here, and instead of showing report name, I'm going to bring in that top or that header variable that I just created. So now we have a report that says top 100% by revenue. Next, I'm going to go in and I'm going to create those input controls. I'm going to click on new to create a new one. And again, this is going to be the input control that controls what is represented by top percent. So I'm going to select that variable, click next. I wanted this to be radio buttons. And in them, I want it to say select percentage to display. Next, I'm going to make a custom list of values. So the values that I want to add to here are going to be, and this is pretty cool. This is actually another little trick that I like to mention while I'm doing it, just in case anyone doesn't know this. In the list of values, you have two options. You can either type a value, hit enter, and move it over to the right, or use this arrow, or you can type your values one after another with a semicolon in between them, and then hit enter. And it'll actually delineate them and move them over to the right for you automatically. That way you don't have to type them all one at a time. This is also nice if you're creating the same input control over and over again with the same list of values. You can actually copy that list of values and paste it into your next input control when you create it. It's just a quick time saver that I like to use. Click OK. I now have that custom list of values. And I do want to leave it to allow the selection of all values, because all values is going to represent that 100% amount. When I click finish, I now have my report input controls. So if I start toggling through them, you can see that the header is changing based on which one I select already, because I'm using that top percent variable in the header, but the table isn't doing anything, and that's what we're going to fix next. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this table to something that I can recognize. So I'm going to call it 100 because this one represents 100%. So for me, having the ability to name tables is huge, because sometimes I have so many that I don't know what is where. So I use this name to put something descriptive so I can distinguish one from the other. Sometimes I'll do, if I have 3 across the top and 3 across the bottom, I'll do, TL, TM, TR for top left, top middle, top right. Things like that as well, just so that there's no mistaking which table is where when I go into them. So the next thing I wanted to leverage, and this was part of my poll question, was hiding the table based on a formula. So I'm going to check this box, and that actually enables this formula panel below where I can start to type in a formula. So I am going to hide this table anytime that top percent value is not blank. So to do that, I'm actually going to use a reverse formula and use the word not around it, because it makes it a little bit easier than trying to go through all the different iterations of what it could be. So I can just this way say what it isn't. I'm going to say top percent equals blank. And again, the not around there makes it the opposite. Check to make sure I typed it in correctly. Good. And now when I click OK, see, nothing has changed, but when I go in and I check off any of these other report input controls, the table disappears. So this is truly just my top 100% table at this point. To build out the rest of the tables, first I'm going to copy this 100% table and just put a copy of it over here. start with that. I like to start with something I've already formatted, because if I, start joining the values in again, I have to start all over with formatting the table. And I've already done that. I've put the width, I've sorted descending, everything like that is already done. So now I'm going to go into this table, and this is going to be my 75% table. So again, I like to give it that descriptive name. I'm going to name this one 75. So this one is going to display only when that top percent variable says 75%. So I want to change this and fill that in there. And when I click OK, that table is going to disappear. But to bring it back, all I have to do is check the 75% in my input control, and now I can start cleaning this up a little. So I'm going to move the table over to the position it should be in. Now I have top 75% by revenue, but it's not showing the top 75%. Right now it's showing the top 100%. So I have to go in and I have to apply a ranking. So I want my ranking to be based on percentage. And again, this is the top 75% of revenue, and it is ranked by customer state. So when I click OK, we now have this ranked table of the top 75%. So again, I can go back to the 100% table, or I can show the 75% table. Pretty cool. And again, still when I click 50 or 25, everything disappears. So to get the last two, I'm going to repeat the same steps. I'm going to take the 75 table, copy it. I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to go into my table properties. And again, I like to give it that name so I can find it. Oops. And that didn't work. There we go. And this one's going to be when 50%. I click OK, the table disappears. I can come over here and I can check off the 50% input control, move my table into place. But then the last step is to change that ranking. So if I come in here and I click on edit ranking, I can change this to top 50%. When I click OK, you'll see it applied the ranking. The table got a little bit smaller again. And then finally, same thing for the 25%. So I'm just going to copy my table, paste it, go into the formatting, change the name just for me, and change this to 25%. Check off my input control, move the table, and again, just edit that ranking to 25 instead of 50. All right, and now we have the ability to scroll through our input controls and dynamically show our table with whichever percentage we want based on which input control we're choosing, 50, 25, and so on. Any questions on this example?
Someone did ask if they could know the version of this Webi demo.
We are on 4.2. I'm not sure which patch. Support Pack 7 is the version that I'm using today. 4.2 Support Pack 7.
Awesome, thanks. And that's the only question for this one as of now.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, if anyone thinks of any as we move along, by all means, feel free to jump in and still ask. So let's jump back over here. So we wanted to kind of conclude our presentation with another poll question. So Anna Laura, if you want to do the third poll question.
Yes, so this third poll question, would you be interested in building dashboards in Webi? Please select one. So yes, and I am already doing so. Yes, and I would love to learn how. Not sure, but would still love to learn how. And no, we use other tools to build dashboards. So I'll give everyone just a few seconds to answer this poll question again, and we will launch the results right after. All right, so it looks like 32% answered yes, and I'm already doing so. 45% said yes, and I would love to learn how. 13% are not sure, but would still love to learn how. And then 10% said no, we use other tools to build dashboards.
Okay, so that's good information. And the reason we asked that is because a lot of the things that we showed today are things that you could use to start building those dashboards or incorporate into existing dashboards. Just little tips for how you could make things look different based on what a user selects, just simply hiding a table or, you know, even applying those bar charts to something just to give it a little bit more, you know, presentability. So that's part of why we asked this question, and also just so that, you know, we can plan our future sessions as well, because we would love to have the opportunity to do another one of these sessions again in the future and maybe get a little bit more into Webi dashboarding if that's a topic of interest. So that's everything I had to show for today. Are there any additional questions or things I can show or answer for you?
We did have some questions come in for that first demo, Heather. I just kind of wanted to let you go into the second demo before we run out of time. So the question asks, can you show adding a chart legend to represent the percentage ranges for each color?
Interesting. I have never actually thought to do that, but I love that idea. So, I mean, it's not really a true chart, so there is no legend that you could necessarily turn on, but I would say we could probably, I'd have to think about it a little. I'm not sure quickly, but I would think that we could easily do something. Let me flip back over to Webi. And I had closed that one, but I have a copy of it here. Let me just open a copy. I'm kind of doing this on the fly, so bear with me here, but I'm going to try to build something quickly here. So let's delete this here. And we'll put in here, we'll just start hard coding values in here. So I had used, in my example, let me grab back those numbers. So I had used 0 to 1%. So we'll just kind of bring this 0 to 1%. That is the first value, and then I'll add a row below. I like this idea. I'm going to use this in future ones. We'll just on to 5%. So this is how I would start to do it. I would just build a table manually here and start adding things like this. Rows below, and then we'll do, obviously I'm not being technical here with my percentages, or I would be, you know, a little bit more accurate with them. And then insert rows below. We'll just say 10+%. And then we could probably use that same fill to put just one character here, just like I did with that. So if I go back to my formula, I'm just going to steal it. It's a little bit easier. Steal the first half of it. Oops, always do that to me. Copy. If I come in here and I put that fill character, and then I just say 1. I just want one character there. It's going to give me a block. Yep. I guess I have to put it in all of them. And then you could just format these to be whatever color you want. So, you know, I could come in here and say format cell and change the font color to red, for example, like I did in my chart. Yeah, it just, so this is how I would do it if I wanted to build a legend that goes along with it. That's a really cool question. I like that. I could have the orange, yellow, and green, just like I did with my actual. Because again, this isn't a real chart where it has a legend that you could turn on and off. So you kind of have to trick it and build your own. But I would definitely do something along these lines. And then up here, you know, you could just put in legend. Oops, I forgot the V. There we go, legend. And then I would merge these so they look a little nicer. And then you can move it wherever you want it. So that's how I would do it if I wanted to build a legend to go along with this.
Awesome. And someone else asked, is there an option to create some sort of bar graph that would show states on the bottom and revenues as the actual bars?
That's interesting. I've actually had that question before, and I've tried to do it, but the reason it has to be a vertical table the way that I have it is because this isn't actually a bar as you would think it would be. It's a font. So it's almost as if it has the words here or numbers. So, instead of seeing a block here, imagine it was filling in, a zero. You would have 1 0 here. You would have, 11 zeros here. You would have 25 zeros here. So you can't really flip that and have it go up and down vertically because it's characters. It's not necessarily an actual bar. So I haven't figured that out yet, but it's on my list of things to keep trying to do.
Great. And then someone else asked if this had any impact on performance.
Well, this is a really simple example, so I haven't seen any impacts on performance personally here. I would imagine if you built this, again, it's just characters, so it's just another variable. I guess we've all experienced where we have 50 variables in a report and everything goes really slowly, but that's going to happen no matter what when you have a large number of variables, I would say. It's no worse than adding another variable to your report, though, and having some conditional formatting. I haven't seen any performance hits personally.
Awesome. And then someone is wondering if we can export those input controls to Excel.
That is an interesting question too. To my knowledge, I don't believe that Webi has that functionality unless there's, something I don't know yet. So that's my short answer is I don't believe input controls transfer out of Webi.
All right. And then what was the char value you were using again is what someone else is looking for.
Okay, 9608. Let me display it here and highlight it for you. And that's the one full block. That's one I write down on my whiteboard. I like that one. When I find one, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I put it somewhere where I can always look to it. So that's definitely one to me that's a keeper. It's pretty useful in a lot of scenarios.
All right. And someone else asked, is it possible to create some sort of pivot tables on this platform?
A pivot table in Webi?
Yes.
So I guess I would want them to elaborate a little bit on that. So to me, a pivot table is kind of like a crosstab, right? So yeah, you can do a crosstab in here, but it's not like a true pivot table like you get in Excel. That's more of an Excel function, to my knowledge. I would think you could do something very similar with input controls again. I would make a crosstab, and then I would have the input controls for whatever values I wanted to be able to select or deselect. So yeah, I would think in theory you could. It would be something I've never actually tried to do, but I think it's possible. Again, and if you're in a table, I don't know if everyone knows this is another thing I do all the time, and you want to flip it or something, if you do turn into, you can rotate these tables and change them around pretty quickly here. So, you can change, this is a vertical table. If I wanted to flip it horizontal, which someone asked me to do earlier, and I'm happy to do it. It's not pretty. I'm going to warn you now, because again, these charts, they're characters, so they go across, not up and down. This out of the way so you can see it a little better. So it is possible to change your table. And again, a pivot table is basically just a crosstab with some controls available. So you could do that as well. Not necessarily with this table, but you do have that ability. And you can control, if you go into assign data, you can control which things are your columns, which things are your rows, very similar to a pivot table. Go back, there we go. Any other questions?
Yes, there's a few. So can we use our Webi report to enter the data in the database or modify the data?
The database. So you're trying to write back to a database with a Webi report. Am I understanding that correctly? Webi is really more for reporting on the data, not going the other direction. I'm trying to think of if I've ever done anything like that. Off the top of my head, I honestly don't have an answer, but I'm happy to look into that, or try to see if it's something I can find offline, if there's a way to do it. To me, it always goes the other way, right? You have your data in a database. Webi sits over top of that database, and you use it to display and report on that data. Not necessarily the other way around, but there are events and triggers and things that exist in Webi that you might be able to use to do a little bit of data changes or manipulations. I've just never personally done that.
All right, and then someone asked if you can change the setting on the cell to vertical.
I
I'm assuming for the
don't
bars.
know that. Yeah, I'm not sure that would work. That's an interesting question. Let's try it. Let's see here, right? So, yeah, I'm trying to think where that is. It's been a while since I've even had a reason to do that. Horizontal. So I get what they're asking. I'm just not sure in Webi where that feature is because I don't do it very often.
Okay,
Like the
and
text
someone asked,
alignment. Go ahead.
someone asked if how do the bars present in Excel or PDF export?
Well, the PDF is just an image of what you're seeing on your screen, so it would look pretty similar to this. The Excel one. Let's do an export and take a look at it. Report. So it looks pretty nice, actually. So you can see, I mean, if you are looking up in here in the cell, you can really see, click enable editing, you can really see what those blocks are represented as. You know, you can see that they're characters. And if I start spacing through here, you can see my cursor kind of moving through the block characters. But I mean, personally, this is something I would send to somebody. I think it looks pretty nice. And we could do PDF also. It'll look very similar to what you're seeing here.
Awesome, thanks Heather. Well, that looks like that's all the questions that we have here for now.